Good evening, everybody. Got people here, and we welcome the people that may watch us online. It's good to have a stranger back tonight. We've got Pastor Tom back after several weeks, and we're sure glad prayers worked on him. Keep you in practice. We'll just let you open us with prayer tonight.
Father, thank you, Lord, for once again allowing us to assemble and be a part, Father, of your kingdom. Father, and I thank you, Lord, for this class. I thank you, Lord, for those that are hungry for your word. Lord, both here and also watching online, Father. I just pray, Father, that you'll minister during tonight. And as always, we ask that you teach this class. Help us to understand what your word has to say. We ask in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. We'll jump right into it, and I'll try to get through it. There's a lot. I've tried to condense everything I can tonight. Tom's got some presentation to make, and we've got another CD portion to watch that I think is going to be pretty interesting. Let's jump into the Mideast. A whole lot's happened this last week. If you remember last week when we were here, we had talked about the fact that the Houthis had started shooting more into the Red Sea on a serious nature. And I made the comment then that Biden had to do something to stay, and they did. In fact, they were doing it while we were here Thursday night. When I got home and checked the news, the United States and Britain had started striking the Houthis in Yemen in retaliation for their strikes on the shipping lanes. The interesting thing is, you would think that we would have went in, and I guess we made fairly, according to them, according to our government, fairly heavy hits on them. It has not slowed them down. They hit another ship yesterday, and actually hit the ship. Here's the thing: we're in the position now of where the Houthis evaded our ability to knock down all the missiles yesterday, and they struck I think it was a Greek registered ship that was headed to Israel, and they struck it. The ship reported they were struck. They had damage, but they were still able to steer. But it's basically shut down the traffic through the Red Sea, and that's a big deal. It's going to impact worldwide trade considerably, already has, and it's going to increase prices because two reasons on stuff at ship. One is the fact that the trip takes so much longer, you'll use a lot more fuel. The other thing is insurance rates. So it's a big deal. And I'm going to jump ahead, and this just happened today. I'll jump over to China real quick, just for some news. One of the Chinese ministers talking about the Houthis says it's not a bad thing. And the reason he said that, it's interesting. The main reason he's saying it's not a bad thing is because the Houthis are showing the world that the United States is not the big bad guy they think they are. Right. And there's truth to that. I mean, there is. Just like today, if they were able to hit another ship after we'd went in and thumped them and had warned them time and time again not to do it, but evidently we didn't thump them hard enough. So I don't know what we've hit, in my knowledge, I think they've had 3 different strikes from Britain and the United States ships, airplanes off our ships, has hit Yemen, and Yemen's still firing back. So it's going to be interesting to see. Here's the thing, and I'll jump around a little bit because one of the British UK ministers today said that the world is in a pre-war stage. And I think he's right. And I see across the world, as I'm reading news feeds, more and more government officials with the same mantra. We're in a pre-war stage. The world's just on the brink of a world war. And it's not going to take much to really light it up. For instance, let me finish one other thought first. the Chinese minister that's talking about that this is a good thing. It shows that the United States no longer rules the seas. The second thing he said was good for China because it is putting more support for their Brick Road initiative. And if you remember, we've talked about that in here. China wants to build an over-the-land road from China into Europe.
Right.
And they're working on it. I mean, it's actually being put together, and this makes that better for them because they'll be able to ship stuff over the ground, over the land, and not have to go out on the sea. So it supports their plans, is what they're saying. To talk about why things are such a hot button right now in the Mideast, Iran's into the mix now. I don't know if you picked up on it or not. Iran sent missiles into Pakistan, Syria, and Iraq. All three countries were fired upon, not by terrorists, but by the Iranian government themselves, their own army. So the Iranian Guard. That's a big deal. That's a major, major escalation in the war in the Mideast. Now, Pakistan has already struck back once, and the big danger is there. Pakistan's a nuclear country. They have nuclear weapons. They're part of the big boys. And so Iran is just, it's part of it's got to be back to this thing of their belief that they're bringing the Mahdi back, that they're forcing the end times, that Mahdi's going to appear, Tom, and Jesus is coming back with him to help support the Mahdi. If you don't understand their basic thing on end times, you need to spend a little time. It's all over the internet. You can pull it up and see the information. But that's what they believe. They believe they're doing an act of God by forcing these wars to come about. So it's a big deal. Like I said, the U.S. and UK continues to hit Yemen. I didn't read anything today where we made any strikes, but I'm sure next day or so you're going to read more about it. Israel says they are winding down on Gaza. But here's an interesting thing. They were talking about that in the north they control everything and they're pretty good in the central and they're still focusing on the south. But I thought it was really interesting. Yesterday, Hamas fired 20 rockets from central Gaza into southern Gaza at the Israelis.
Right.
They're evidently not in a whole lot of control across that country if they could fire off 20 rockets yesterday. And they continue to fire rockets on a daily basis, but 20 at one time, and actually fired them within their country at the Israelis in the south. So the other thing that's going on there is that there's so much pressure on Israel. The United States is just really pressuring them hard. The big deal is they're trying to bring medicine into the hostages. And the deal they worked out was that for every 100 pounds, if I think I've got this right, for every 100 pounds of medical supplies that's brought in for the hostages, 1,000 pounds is being brought in that's supposed to go to the Gazan people, to the Palestinians.
Right.
But that's not been shown functioning yet.
Now, is that coming from us?
From Israel. It's supposed to be coming from Israel. Well, actually, it may be coming from more than just Israel's supposed to be controlling it because they don't want arms and stuff shipped with it. But some of the other Arab countries, I know Egypt and Qatar, both have been sending medical supplies down that they want sent into the Gaza Strip. But we are seeing some words coming from, it was either at Davos or at the UN. There are some countries starting to say, Hezbollah needs, or Hamas needs to surrender. and the war needs to stop, but Hezbollah needs to surrender. And so, or I said Hezbollah, Hamas needs to surrender into Gaza. Now, the other thing is, which is not getting a whole lot of play here in the States, the West Bank, which is Judea and Samaria, that is Arab, predominantly Arab, those two regions are. They arrested 300 terrorists yesterday. The Israelis went in. They're having continued attacks from Hamas on the West Bank, in the West Bank, which is Israel. So within country, they're still having. And then you've got this whole strip across the north, which is Hezbollah firing rockets into northern Israel. And that's heavy fighting every day now too. So this war is not slowed down an iota. No. I mean, don't believe anything you read. If they're telling you, well, this is kind of back and all, it's not. It's stronger. It's hotter today than it was yesterday and in the day before. Every day it's accelerating. That's pretty much in the Mideast, unless somebody's got a question on something. Like I said, the biggest thing is watch what Iran's doing now, because they've entered the war. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. They've entered into the war, and that expanded it considerably.
I saw online, Doug, that some of the ships are using a different tactic. They're flying Chinese flags in an effort to keep from being shot at. Mm-hmm. You know, they're scared to death of China.
Yeah.
So they are using the Chinese flag as one of their banners in order to keep them being fired upon.
The problem with that is that you can get online and just like aircraft flights, all these ships have transponders on them that shows you exactly, you can get on the map and see exactly where a ship is, and you can click on it and it'll tell you who owns it and where it's registered.
Is that something?
Yeah, so you know the Houthis have that capability also. I mean, anybody's got an internet connection can get online and check a ship out, so. Okay, let's jump to the European Union right quick. Russia's still pounding the dickens out of the Ukraine. NATO is really, you're reading more and more every day, different countries, NATO leaders, they're really concerned that Russia's going to expand this war. And they're really worried about that. The Ukrainians did manage to, I don't think they shot them down, but they did manage to damage two of Russia's top-line airplanes, which is anybody, I don't know, maybe you know what an AWACS is.
Yes.
It's the Airborne Warning and Control System, that's AWACS. That's the airplane that flies up high, and it directs the war. It's in touch with everybody on the ground. It's in touch with the tankers, refueling tankers. It's in touch with the fighters. The people sitting in the AWACS has radar control over all the military action that's taken place. Well, Russia has the same thing, but they don't have too many of those planes. These things are very sophisticated, very expensive, and evidently the Ukrainian was able to hit one of them and damage it. They have another smaller plane that does the same thing. It's just not quite as sophisticated, doesn't cover quite as large area, and they damaged that one too. They somehow or other, Ukraine, surely with the help of United States and NATO, set some sort of a trap up the way they were talking. I haven't looked at it in detail, didn't make any difference. Ukrainians were claiming they shot them down. Heather and I was watching Monkey Works last night, and he says he sees no evidence that they were shot down. His thought was that they were probably damaged and had to land, and that's probably what happened. If they'd been shot down, you'd already see pictures of it, and that's not the case. They're not there today, and this happened day before yesterday. So that's how you kind of filter through some of this fake news stuff. Is like I've told you before, if I see something, and some things I'm no expert, but there's things I have experience with, And I know that if they shot down one of the I think it's an AN-22 Russian AWACS, it's a big deal. And you're going to see pictures of it. In fact, the United States would probably leak pictures of it, or the NATO, because it shows Ukraine winning. That's what you would see. You would say, oh, Ukraine's winning the war. Look what they've done. Well, there's no pictures. So that tells me, yeah, they maybe hit it and damaged it, but shoot it out of the sky and crashed, don't think so. Now, it could be changed. I could find out different next day or two. Like I said, NATO's really worried that Russia's going to move against some of the other NATO countries. And of course, NATO keeps forcing that they're going to increase the membership, and they're going to make Ukraine part member of NATO, et cetera. So they're just forcing the issue. So it wouldn't be surprising. The other thing that's going on in Europe right now is Davos. You guys been following any of that?
Right.
Okay.
I'm hearing the name, but I
All right.
don't really
Well, Davos is the World Economic Forum, the big deal. Yesterday, they did the Disease X exercise. Here's the thing. They went through one of these exercises, Bill Gates was involved with it before COVID
Right.
broke out. And COVID broke out exactly the way they had this exercise. Well, now they're looking for Disease X, is what they're causing. And the reason it's called Disease X because it doesn't have a name yet. It'll get a name when it comes out. But that's a hot topic. And the topic got even hotter when it was learned this week that China has been working on more man-made diseases. They've taken the COVID, they've enhanced it, and I don't know whether you're aware or not, but they make lab mice that are genetically engineered to, especially on respiratory, to mimic humans. Their systems mimic our systems, and that's what they test this stuff on, to see the efficacy of what they've designed. Well, this time out, I think last time the COVID killed 20% of the humanized mice. This booger killed all of them in 8 days. All the humanized mice that were exposed to this new virus that Chinese labs produced died. It's a big deal. And the thing that's interesting, China obviously is still militarily creating genetic diseases. And if you tie that back to what we've talked about in here, where China obviously has been working on, I read an article, it's been a year or so ago, and it's back to these blood samples that
Right.
China was wanting, and these things to where, okay, another thing was one of these DNA registry things, whether you send your DNA in and they tell you where you came from and what your ancestry is and everything. China's been drawing this stuff. And they set out several years ago, their goal was to genetically type every race in the world. Well, why would you do that? Well, you can genetically produce a disease that would maybe just kill people from North Europe. Yeah. And that's obvious. And the other thing is, which is a fact known now, with this mouse thing that came out just last week, their labs are working on militarily producing man-made diseases for combat.
Could that not end up being, like, not only just certain segments of population, like you said, but like all people that are blonde,
Yeah, well, you could, yeah.
people that are in a certain age?
You're absolutely right, Nancy. They can genetically alter something if they've got a DNA format put together. Like you said, blondes or blue eyes or brown hair or whatever, yeah, they could do that.
What were we watching said that this disease X was going to be set to where it would target people who had received the COVID vaccines and boosters.
Yeah, there was some talk that the COVID vaccine was setting up a scenario for people, that those people that had the vaccine could then be targeted. So, interesting. Also at Davos, they're now calling for ecocide laws. You have genocide laws on a worldwide basis, right? Israel right now is in the world court, having been charged by South Africa for genocide on the Palestinians in Gaza. That's going on. That just started this last week. Well, now the climate people are wanting crimes against nature, crimes against the climate, to be treated the same as genocide. And they want the laws put in place so that if a country is doing something to violate the climate or the world, that you can draw them into world court. That's what they're after, and that's called ecocide. It just doesn't stop. It just gets stronger and stronger all the time. And like I told you last week, I think it was, the two main concerns. It's interesting. There's three major concerns at Davos now. The major concern was, we talked about last week, I think one of you brought it, climate's one of them, but the other is the economic problems. The big thing, big talk this week, last few days since the election in Iowa, they're scared to death of Trump on a worldwide basis.
Right.
China has come out with statements about how Trump presidency is not going to be good. In fact, one of the ministers in China said we must start preparing for a Trump presidency now, today. I'm trying to think who was. The headline I read was that Davos was freaking out over Trump. And I can't remember exactly who the European ministers were, but they're all up in arms that Trump is showing as strong as he is. So they're worried. And the reason being is, I told the other day, I don't believe, I just can't imagine there's any way they're going to let this man get elected this fall. You've got a worldwide globalist movement that has tremendous strength, tremendous power, financed by the top monies in the world, and I can't believe that man's going to make it to, somehow or other, they're going to take that guy out, whether it's killed or just made such that he can't run, or there's no election. They're not going to let that man get elected. I don't believe.
I was watching on YouTube a week or better ago. It was a whole video on different prophetic voices, and they were sharing what I've been showing them for this year. And one of them actually said prophetically that they saw one of the candidates that are running being assassinated.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, Nancy brings up assassination. Assassinations are rampant around the world right now. There were several in South America this time. The other day you had one in Japan, or South Korea, one in Japan. You had attempted assassination in Japan. One of the ministers got stabbed in the neck. Assassinations of world political leaders is on the rise around the world. So yeah, but I can't believe the powers to be are not going to attempt to do something to keep him, and it's really funny. Like I said, I try not to get into politics. Trump showing in Iowa shows you that the everyday people are fed up. And not only here, you look in Argentina, The gentleman that was just, I think his name's what, Milo?
Yeah.
That just got elected in Argentina is a populist like Trump. And the young man that's elected in Ecuador that's taking on the cartels right now, he's a populist. You're seeing it over in Europe. That's why some of the countries in Europe are not supporting the Ukrainian war, because the people are starting to rise up and saying enough's enough. So it's going to be, just like we said, it's going to be such an interesting year. Just
Well, and that's what I said. I mean, look at Nikki Haley. Does she look at all threatening?
is what?
Did she look threatening to anyone? I mean, I can't imagine that these world powers could be afraid of anything that she would do. This
Right.
little skinny little, like she doesn't exude.
The presidential type,
She's
yeah.
not presidential
Yeah.
to me at
So-
all.
So anyhow, like I said, I don't want to get into the politics of the thing, because just not, we don't need to worry about that. We got much more to worry about. About done here, China, of course, now see, Taiwan president won. That's a conservative party. And it was funny because Heather says, well, that's a good thing. And I said, well, I said it was a good, it's good and bad from the standpoint that if mainline China's candidate had won, you probably wouldn't see China move against Taiwan anytime soon, because it would show that they were making some progress getting into the government of Taiwan. That didn't happen, so now China definitely, in my mind, is going to see figure out what they're going to do to move against Taiwan to bring it in. Biden stands up the day afterwards and says, we won't support a independent Taiwan.
I saw that.
Did you see that? Yeah. Oh yeah, Biden came out and said, we don't support an independent Taiwan.
Doesn't want to make his boss mad.
Yeah. So it's the other thing that's going on in that part of the world. North Korea. Here's another major step to where you can think we're closer to a world war. North Korea has come out and said, we will never have reunification with South Korea. So there's been some work for years now trying to unify the North and South Korea back into one country. North Korea says those talks are over. We're not interested, not going to happen. So, and then North Korea is they're prepping for war. There's no doubt about that. The other thing I was going to mention, and I forgot, in the Mideast, which is an important thing. Why did Iran said that they were firing the rockets at terrorists, ISIS. See, ISIS is Iran's enemy. Well, so they're saying we fired these rockets in Pakistan, Iraq, and Syria at ISIS. But one thing they were really doing, especially the rocket they fired at Syria, they were showing Israel, we've got rockets that can hit you. Because that's a long distance.
That is way.
It's a long ways from Iran to Syria. And so part of it was a warning to Israel. We can hit you. We've got the rockets to hit you. So I wanted to make that point.
Another thing in North Korea, Doug, is that you have two leaders right now in North Korea. His sister, Kim Jong-un's sister, is really starting to flex some muscle, whether it's with his approval or not. We don't know, but she is really starting to create some waves. I kind of imagine that may blow up to some degree.
Very well could. There's, like I said, we really don't have the information coming out, but we know she's active. And his daughter seems to be getting a lot of play at the same time. Of course, that's a family affair over there that's running North Korea. And so, you're right. Something like that could blow up in the face too. Real quick, just some things here in the United States. Have you been following the Palestinian attacks on the White House? Protests. They're tearing the fence down. Not arresting them. You're not getting it's not an insurrection. You know, if that had been patriots out there doing that, they'd all be in jail and going to prison. But they're damaging property, trying to break down the fence around the White House, getting away with it. Starting to see that some of the claims of voter fraud were real. So far, they say it's taken a while for this stuff to work through the courts. There's been 12 cases so far this year determined, and all 12 of them, the people that were charged with voter fraud were found guilty. So they can't keep saying there's no evidence of voter fraud, because there is.
Well, it's not just that. Everybody knows at this point now, they're even coming out and just blatantly saying it, that people coming across the border are potential voters.
Yeah, the one that really got me, I love these people that go around with their cameras and come up to some of these protesters and stuff and ask them questions. I think the last time I saw them doing that, they were people that were signing the petition. We talked about it here, the petition against Israel and for Hamas. Mm-hmm. And people say, well, do you know what Hamas stands for? And, you know, they want to kill the gays, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And people say, oh, I can't sign that. You know, the guy would come up and say, would you sign this petition? And by the way, when you do, the guy will say, oh yeah, I'll sign. And so the guy says, well, I want you to know that Hamas wants to kill all the homosexuals. Oh, well, I can't sign that. See, they were going to sign the petition until they found out what they stood for. This one this week's really good. Got a young man, mid-20s, walking down the street with an Intifada sign, okay? Support, you know, move, you want Hamas, move Israel from the country, kill the Jews, Intifada. Guy asked him, what's Intifada mean? He had no idea.
No.
Didn't even know what Intifada does. They asked him where he got the sign. He said, well, I just picked it up off the table over there. And he's marching down the street with Intifada. Doesn't even know what it means. It's showing you the ignorance, especially of some of these young college kids that we've got now, because they haven't been taught.
Do you have a definition of what Intifada means?
It's holy war.
Holy war, okay.
Yeah. It's holy war, and it's the holy war of removing the Jews, and Intifada is to bring Mahdi back. That's what it's for. They want a world war to bring Mahdi back. That's the way their religion preaches, and that's what they're taught. Okay, 2 things I want you to do. Start watching for a movie called God and Country. It'll be coming out February 16th. I don't know if it'll be here or not. I was going to try to find out. I will. Before our next meeting, I'll find out. You got some homework. I would really love for you to spend time watching Jack Hibbs. It's called Happening Now. It's on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And it's Jack Hibbs with Seth, S-E-T-H, Gruber, G-R-U-B-E-R. You need to watch it. I'm telling you. You want to get educated in some areas real quick. I don't want to go into it. I want you to really want to ask you to watch it. And we're going to have Sam, our daughter, she's going to watch it. Heather and I watched it the other night, and I was blown away. This guy has the goods, and he's done the research, as Seth Gruber has. Excellent, sharp, but he's got everything that he claims. He's got a new book out. Everything he claims, he has footnoted and verified this is true. And he's got so much of that stuff. I couldn't believe all the exact quotes he had on the tip of his tongue of people.
How many dots he's able to connect
Yeah,
is amazing.
it is. It really is. So you need to watch it. Those at home, you know, like I said, it's Jack Hibbs, Happening Now, and it just came out about 5 or 6 days ago, and it's Jack Hibbs with Seth Gruber. I'm done, Pastor Tom.
Well, you know, the thing is, Doug, is that Biden and the administration keeps asking more money for Ukraine, and it's becoming more and more apparent of the involvement that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and different ones had with Ukraine and the corruption on both sides,
Yeah.
and how people are starting to see, that there has to be a reason why they are asking so much funding for a failed effort.
And we talked about last week, you weren't here, but the Inspector General has found $1 billion missing, worth of equipment missing. And Ukraine themselves admit that, well, yeah, we do know that $258 million worth is not accounted for. I still believe that, and you're right, Tom, that both the Ukraine and China has stuff over Biden's head, because a lot of those business dealings involve China also.
And the sad part about it, Doug, is a lot of our politicians do have things over their heads. They do have an intertwinement with governments that would not be approved of by the people.
Yeah.
And it's on both sides of the aisle. It's not just Democrats.
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
Democrats, Republicans,
Yeah.
both. They both have, they've all been, both have profited from these agreements with foreign governments.
Right.
And to the point that, okay, how much more information have you given them in lieu of payment? Right. So, you really start to scratch your head and think, we're starting to collect, you have a dot-to-dot puzzle, you start connecting the dots and you start making a picture and you start seeing now, oh, I understand now what's going on, I understand that, they're really in a vice. They're committed. They're not just committed, they have a noose around their neck. They have to do this, period, or they'll be exposed.
Yeah. It's all yours, brother.
Okay. For a long time, I've always wanted to do a chronological study from the year 586 forward. And because I always thought it was fascinating to find that, and I use my chronological Bible. If you don't have one, get one. They're really, really helpful. I mean, because it outlines almost in a narrative structure, because it compounds the scriptures as it unfolds, as events unfold. And so you have, you'll have Jeremiah and Uzziah both were contemporaries in Jerusalem, and they were warning the king, Jehoiakim, that you are going to be attacked, you're going to be destroyed. And of course they didn't like that, and it ended up throwing Jeremiah in prison because of it. And fortunately he was able to get out, get out of prison. And it's all right. Little background music there. Yeah. So I started this study. Nebuchadnezzar dies in 561 BC. His son's name is Evil Merodach, and his son becomes the king in his place. Now it's interesting that Psalm 137 was written in 550 BC. So what happened in 550 BC? It was the years after Jerusalem was sacked and Judah was carried off into captivity. So when you get this psalm, when you read this psalm, you realize that it's being written after the fact, after everything has happened. And I was so moved by this because I think of myself, and we've all done it. We look at Facebook, and someone will say, I remember when you could buy such and such for 10 cents back when I was a kid, or something like that. Do you remember this? And you remember that? Of course we do, You kind of reminisce, to a time when, why were those the good old days the good old days? Because life was simpler, things were less expensive, there were greater morals and values than what we have today. Life today is very complicated concerning that. And the fact with Facebook and different things on internet really compounds that. You know, you don't have to have someone out in the corner now screaming at the top of their lungs about something that's going on. You just put it on Facebook. You know, all of a sudden you have all these people who are following. So the year is 550 BC, and it's Psalm 37. If you'd like to turn there, you can. And we're going to go down here. And we look at people who are now sitting in captivity. And they're sitting reminiscing. And the writing and the verbiage in this is so strong to me, is that it helps us to understand that after, dare I say, America collapses into something it's going to become, we may all look one day and think about, I remember when, and things were so much better, you know. And so here you have people that are sitting, it says in verse 1, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yes, we wept when we remembered Zion. And the note I have here is customary for the Jews to hold their religious meetings on the banks of the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. The final carrying away of the Jews from Jerusalem would have been 586. At the writing of this psalm would have been 36 years after Assyria and Babylon took Israel captive and implemented God's judgment upon the nation of Israel and Judah. Verse 2, it says, we hanged our harps in the willows. We hanged our harps in the willows. And when you read about that, you think, you know, what a descriptive term. When they hung their harps, why would they hang their harps to willows? Because there was nothing good to sing about. There was nothing left of them. And when you think about that, there was nothing there to cause them to want to rejoice. Let me turn to it real quick, make sure I have it. And so we hung our harps upon the willows in the midst of it. And here we have this description of them remembering. They used to sing and rejoice and things like that, you know, because of their God. There's a list of 8 different things that happened. Number 1, we sat down. And sitting down is not just a symbol of rest, but it's also a symbol of surrender, a symbol of defeat. How much more descriptive can you become? And as we sit there, we wept. And we remembered Zion as we wept. We hung our harps in the willows. We refused to sing a song of the Lord while in captivity. Verses 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. We vowed not to forget Jerusalem. We prayed for vengeance upon all those who rejoiced in our fall. We predicted the fall of the Babylonians. Verse 3, and it says, For there those who carried us away captive asked of us a song, and those who plundered us requested mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. They wanted a song. Who wanted a song? It was the Babylonians. Those that were there, they had them in captivity. The song that they said they wasted us required us a song. The word wasted there is the term deteriorated, ravaged, and consumed. So they had been taken captive and held. I have a note here as the psalmist reflects on the time when the Judeans lived by the rivers of Babylon. For many of the Judeans, life in Babylon was good. They lived by the Tigris and Euphrates River and enjoyed a regular harvest due to complete system of irrigation canals. The very token of life, or which is the rivers and the trees, brought material blessings to the captors and the captives themselves. Verse 4, he said, how shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? I have a notice that it's estimated to be about 500 miles from Jerusalem to Babylon. It took approximately 4 months to traverse this distance. So the question is how shall we sing a song of the Lord? How can we do it when we remember Zion? And the answer is perhaps the occasion was after the hard work of the day, when the captives gathered to spend time in worship. When about to sing a song of Zion, they were moved with such deep emotion and distress about the state of their barren land, beloved land, that they could not sing. So they hung their harps in the willow trees. Verse 5. If I forget, O Jerusalem, let my hand forget its skill. What was the skill of the hand? To play music. Number 6, if I do not remember you, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I do not exalt Jerusalem above my chief joy. Think about just a moment if in America today, we have a lot of people who have come across the border. Many of them had no idea who they were. They've come across, they have no identity, so to speak. So they could be, they know they've caught terrorists. And they know that there are terrorist organizations in the United States right now. And so when we have, when something does go awry, and the time comes, and when you were talking about how you keep Trump from winning the election in the fall, what if between now and November, we have a complete uprising in our country? And once martial law is set in action, there are no elections. Did you know that? No elections can happen because of the fact that you cannot have an election during the middle of a huge campaign like that, a war. So when you have something like that, that's one sure way of not having someone come in and take over, as you know, such as the elections, that having Donald Trump come in. Let's just create an insurrection across the country. You know, we have the people. They might say, we have the people, and they're all in place. I read an article the other day, Doug, that the United States government was trying to get a firm understanding of all these paramilitary groups.
Yeah.
One of the groups that come to mind is Mom in Montana. And Mom in Montana is a huge paramilitary group that's in Montana. And even though they are not directly linked with law enforcement, they are used many times to help.
Yeah, and with that, you know, I'm familiar with the term FinCEN. That's a banking thing. And it's just been revealed that the federal government, the FBI, has been using the FinCEN, which is what banks have to track transactions. Well, they're tracking transactions at like Bass Pro Shop, example, things of that nature, where those groups you're talking about, and including Christian, I mentioned here several weeks ago, the new byword is Christian nationalist.
Right.
And I've seen that term used 3 times this week when they've been trying to bring down Speaker of the House, Johnson.
Right.
Because Johnson's butting heads with not just the Democrats, but with the Republicans in the Senate, because they're wanting to pass all this money for Ukraine. House Representatives holding it up.
Right.
and they were just crucifying Johnson for being a Christian. And I saw the name. I saw 3 times this week in some of the media reports where they were talking about Christian nationalism, and that Johnson's an example of that. And then this thing comes out where the FBI is using bank data to track purchases of Christian nationalists and any of these patriotic groups that you're talking about.
Right. And the sad part about it is that you hear nothing about the armories that in and around Islamic mosques. They know for a fact that they are there. They know for a fact that they have sent monies and financing to different organizations over in the Middle East. They have direct ties with that. They've caught them doing it, and whether anything was ever done about it, I don't know. But as you look at this, you have this situation where that's one way that you can control ever being another election. And that is if you have an out-and-out insurrection across this nation. And right now, the federal government uses organizations like Black Lives Matter and Antifa as kind of a muscle to try to bring situations into control or make them do what they want to do. Whether we like it or not, that's what's happening. You have people that during the Summer of Love, if you want to hear that, we all remember that little phrase, the Summer of Love. It's most ridiculous thing ever, and here they are. They're holding the city of Portland hostage, certain parts of it, and taking it over and turning it into a little empire of their own. They're burning down buildings, they're attacking cops, they're federal buildings and things like that. Well, all that happens. Well, they take January 6th, which I didn't agree with what the people did, but they've turned them into martyrs. They've imprisoned them and things like that. I didn't agree with what those people did, but it wasn't an insurrection. A protest, yes, but not an insurrection. So it was really interesting that you have one group being winked at, arrested, and then released. So it's really the double-sided part of this justice system is just ridiculous. And so verse 7 says, "Remember, O Zion, the children of Edom." Edom was a nation that was south and east of Jerusalem, and they did everything they could to assist Babylon in destroying. They were crying out to Babylon to raise it. Raise it was to destroy it and to take it down. So there they say, remember Edom. The psalmist wants God to remember the Edomites and their part in the capture of Jerusalem. And I have a note here: the Edomites had done everything to disgrace Judah and keep the Judeans from escaping their captors.
And they're related to them.
Oh yeah, they are.
Yeah, they're
That's Esau.
Esau.
Yeah.
The Edomites were from the line of Esau, so they're actually cousins.
Yeah. Obadiah 1:11 through 14 and Lamentations 4:21. Not only did the Edomites do everything to frustrate the desperate people of Judah, but they also encouraged the Babylonians to tear it all the way down to the foundation. The word foundation here, when you look it up, so it implies more than just the actual foundation of the walls of Jerusalem. It also pertains to the God-established order in creation, His rule, and His election of the people to Himself. The Edomites were hoping for the destruction and the foundation of Yahweh's rule on earth. Obadiah prophesied Edom's destruction. In verse 8 it said, "O daughter of Babylon, you shall be destroyed. Happy shall he be that gives you your reward." And that becomes the 95th prophecy concerning Babylon. The term lex talionis is a principle of retribution. This is viewed as a blessing for the Judean people, anyone who repays Babylon. And a beatitude, verse 9, was very descriptive. A beatitude, blessed is he who seizes the young and dashes the little ones to the rocks. What a graphic depiction. But that's how they viewed Edomites, was that to repay that and punish them for what they had done. I'll stop there, Doug, so we can look at our video, but
Okay. Yeah, that's,
we'll pick it up again next week.
yeah, I really like your parallelism between where you're going with that and with us where we're
Yeah.
at today.
Well,
And-
we so many people, and maybe we're just as guilty, take for granted the freedoms that we enjoy. Because you look just for church attendance
Yeah.
alone, you know, look at the people around the world that can't go to church, you know, that aren't allowed to be a part of it. The Nigerians
Right.
that are
Prime
being
example.
slaughtered.
Yeah. And it's going to be interesting to see if the hard times come upon us that we think is going to happen, and we think is going to happen sooner rather than later. Are people going to react like the Jews did there, to where they're just not going to sing? They can't, if things get to the point to where they're so bad and we come to church, or we're going to be so downtrodden that we're going to feel like the Jews, that we can't even just sing, or we're going to be like Paul and Silas in prison.
Yeah,
If you remember that story,
yeah,
Paul and Silas, they were amazed. They were in chains in prison,
yes,
and the guards were amazed that they were singing songs to God.
right.
How could things be much worse than that? Here they are, changed in prison, but yet the love that they had, the feeling of love for Jesus, they were singing songs of praise. And so that's the question we've got to ask ourselves, and the mindset we've got to be in, that if things do get bad, that we're going to keep that positive mindset, and we're still going to sing songs of praise.
Right.
We're not going to bow to the evil side and let that despair descend upon us.
Yeah.
That's going to be a very important part, and it's going to be the hardest. It's going to be the hardest thing to do.
It's really going to reflect people's walk with Christ.
Yep. It's going to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff,
Right.
real quick. Okay, we'll back out here with those at home. We're going to watch another segment of our Jonathan Cahn book, and hopefully we'll see you next week.